This is the Startup Still Say podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Do us a favor, subscribe on YouTube or LinkedIn, and be sure to give us your feedback. Hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone. This is Anthony Prakash, your host for Startups Still Say. Welcome to a brand new episode of Startups Still Say. We're doing this after a tiny hiatus, if you will. So I'm super excited to be recording another episode, and I have a special guest here, Axel Guyon, who is joining us from Bombay. First of all, thanks so much for taking time on a Saturday morning, Axel, to record this one out of your weekend to do this. I know we met almost 12 months ago in Bangalore. Coincidentally, both of us were seated at the same table in a conference, and Axel and I started talking. It was a fun few hours between the conference, and while people were talking, we were exchanging notes on what each other is doing. I've kept in touch with Axel since, and I'm thrilled to have him on. Axel is currently the country manager for the Choose Paris region, which he'll tell us more about. But before I say more about Axel, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you on. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be on the show and happy to, catch up also with you at the same time. So as you mentioned, now I work for Choose Paris region, for which I'm the country manager for India. So I've been in this position for the last, give or take, a year and a half in Mumbai, where I set up our presence. So Choose Paris region is the promotion agency of the Paris regional government, so kind of like a state. We call them regions in France. And so we promote the region across a few verticals, the three main ones being investment, the investment tourism, and the film commission. And so, of course, there are a few overlaps between all these three, but generally they tend to be like separated in other such or similar organizations. So I talk to, potential investors, entrepreneurs in India to help them understand what market opportunities and incentives they might find in Paris region to develop their businesses. Similarly, I evangelize, I guess that's a word that I can use. I evangelize around tourism and help tourism professionals in India understand what this destination has to offer, so that their travelers can explore more and come back happier from their holidays in France. And finally, for the film commission, we help producers of any format access funding and incentives from France and from Paris specifically, and help them with shoots in and around Paris. So that's a handful, but it's been fun. I have a personal history with India, so I'm very happy to have this position that helps me bridge where I grew up. And part of what I've done before, and my interests and my love, quite literally, for this country that I live in now.
That is amazing, Axel. I'm actually envious of what you get to do. All the three parts that you said, investments, film, tourism. Who wouldn't want that job, right? And Paris is also a pretty easy sell, if you will, right? In the sense, everybody wants to go to Paris. I'm sure you have your own, sort of roadblocks and obstacles that you need to go through rather. But let's talk a little bit about, where you started off, right? Obviously this podcast is about startups. Obviously you've been a startup founder of sorts yourself, but I want to take you back early on in your career. Looking at the path you've taken to get to this point in Mumbai, I consider you a truly global citizen. You're from Paris. You went to school, obviously, there. Then you went to the US. Or in my backyard here, you came to study in Stanford. Then you go back, and then now you're in India. So, it doesn't get better than that. Like I said, you have a fun job. But back to where you started your career, Axel. How are some of the foundational elements of where you started kind of get you to where you are right now? Did you kind of have this vision when you started off, or things just fell in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, I think the latter, definitely. I don't think I could have imagined myself that I'd end up, like being some kind of an evangelizer, salesperson for Paris region in India, of all places. When I started, I guess as an engineering student in France, the jump to the US was sort of made sense. I mean, I was admitted, so why wouldn't I go? And so after studying physics in France, I was more than happy to fly over to the Bay Area and study engineering at Stanford. I had developed a keen interest on everything related to sustainability and renewable energy from I think high school even. And you can probably blame my dad for it because he worked in the French public utility, EDF. So himself an engineer and an energy nerd. But then I thought this was probably going to be it. I'd work as an engineer, have a career similar in some ways to that of my dad's. I did want to, and that's something that I do try to keep in every position that I hold. I do want to make an impact in one way or another in terms of sustainability and energy transition in what I do. And so it sort of made sense for me to go on to Stanford, study this. This program was actually quite interesting because it mixed everything related to the energy transition and climate science. So pretty broad, but you also understood why you were working on the energy transition. And then after that, I actually was fortunate to join this battery startup called, at the time, Alveo Energy, now called Natron Energy, in the Bay in Palo Alto. First as an intern and between my first and second year of grad school, and then full-time. And they gave me a chance to work basically as a material scientist, even though that was not my training. There's some overlap with the physics that I'd studied, but really they showed me the lab and said, okay, there you go. Let's see if that sticks. And it did. And it was a lot of fun. Natron, or Alveo at the time, and then Natron developed. And, sadly now I'll be speaking in the past tense because they're not in business anymore, just from a few months ago. But that's life in the startup world. It developed a battery technology based on this really cool material called Prussian blue, which is used as a dye in blue jeans and paint. So a very common material, very inexpensive. And so, you basically tweak it a little bit. So you call it a Prussian blue analog, and it makes a really cool material for battery electrodes. And its properties that sort of justified, building a company out of it are that you can charge this battery super fast, you can discharge it super fast and still get most of that energy out. There's no, overheating or a particular risk of a thermal runoff as you have in lithium-ion batteries. That's a big concern. And it's made with readily available metals, materials, precursors.
Got it.
And we started this from the ground up. Basically, when you start with a new electrode, you have to reinvent all of the building blocks of the battery. The current collectors, I won't bore you with all the technical stuff. I could talk about this for hours, but everything that comes into the battery needs to have compatibility with those new materials. And you can't just replace, take a lithium-ion battery, replace the electrodes with something else and hope that it'll work. That's not how it works. And so we built this from the ground up. I think when I joined, there were about 10 of us, and I stayed there for 4.5 years. And we started from cells that were the size of a credit card to packs that you can put in a lead acid battery type of format. And it was, there's always this excitement in startups that you're starting something new. You can sort of reinvent a lot of technology, but also ways of working with people and a new culture. So, I mean, I couldn't have hoped for a better way to start my career. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, but that's just startups in the deep tech, CAPEX-heavy space. Yeah. This didn't pan out, but I'd go back anytime. That was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, very nice.
And so I guess, this was sort of along the way that I would have imagined for myself when I started my career. One thing that I would have also expected is that I'd probably go back to France eventually. But that's more, for quality of life, different cultures, more PTO. Yeah. That's important. And being closer to family. And so after 6 years in the Bay, I moved back to France, and I started looking for an opportunity that would match, what I described, my interest in sustainability. Interestingly, I guess I like a challenge. I had come to like the idea of like CAPEX-heavy tech projects, which of course are the riskiest ones, but I like that. So I joined this French startup, which had just raised, I think, about 20 million euros, which is like a big round
Mm.
at the time in the French landscape for a hardware startup. And its name was Agricool. Again, sadly, I'm talking to the past tense. The Valley of Death was not keen to this startup either. That was developing growing systems. So basically, indoor agriculture, like the Plenty is one that's in the Bay, and so we were growing strawberries and leafy greens and herbs out of shipping containers. I think there's one based in Brooklyn that does a similar thing called Squared Roots. Really cool technology. I upgrade from like one single component of an engineering system, the battery, which is a lot of fun to develop in itself, to like the whole system, and to a company that not only has to design the product and make it more reliable and scale it up, but also operate it and sell and market. So that was like a more like 360 type of company, and that was a lot of fun as well.
Got it.
And then I guess this is where I started veering off a little bit. The first little like side turn that I took was when this company, Agricool, had unfortunately filed for bankruptcy. And I was at the time responsible for both engineering and operations at the company. And so when you file for bankruptcy in France, I guess it might be similar in the US, depending on how much cash you have left in the bank, the judge will give you some limited time to try and like keep the company running and look for a new investor. It's a lot more attractive to an investor if the company's still running, if the employees are still there and you're still shipping product. So we had 5 months to do that. Of course, a little challenging to keep everyone as engaged when they know that probably after 4 or 5 months, they may not have a job. But we pushed through it, and we came out on top with a new investor. So that was a great victory for us. And this new investor, basically made Agricool one of its business units, and they had a few other ones, and offered me to, while I was managing this transition time for the Agricool business unit, also offered me to join another business unit of another startup in consumer electronics and handle, and trust me, I guess, a lot of trust, handle their e-commerce, so digital sales and marketing. And there I kind of realized that I could also do that, and it was fun. But then when I decided to, for personal reasons, I guess, disclaimer, I've alluded to it, my wife is Indian, so that's how I ended up in India. I'd managed to convince her to move from the Bay to France. So now this is, we're reciprocating, and we've moved from France to India. And so when we'd been thinking about moving to India for some time, I mean, it's a great place to be in a number of ways. People may not think of it in that way. They have this image of India if they've not been in a while, but it's such like a booming country in so many ways that we were really excited to go there and spend not just like a few weeks of holiday per year. And so that was like more of a personal decision to move to India. And once I moved to India, I happened to be put in touch with someone from the Paris regional government. There was a delegation, coming to India and exactly doing, what I described, which is like confronting the image that they might have of India and realizing that it was much more than they would have expected. And following this delegation visit and the meeting that I had with them, they decided to open an office for their promotion agency and to put me in charge of that office. And here I am.
Very cool. Beautiful story. I mean, love the story. And the way I look at it, Axel, is, I mean, every step you've taken is kind of building towards this step that you've taken in India. And kind of whether it was the battery technology in the startup or the operations role that you did for a little bit, the digital sales one, kind of helps you in this job that you have as a country manager, right? Because I mean, this is almost like you got to do it all. And was kind of setting you up for saying, hey, training for this, training for that, that sort of thing, right? So, few things that caught my attention in your story, right? I mean, you obviously said you are you're keen or you're kind of drawn towards capex intensive projects as well. I mean, in a way, in this role as well, I mean, you have to kind of seed some of those early discussions and try to make investments in what might be helpful for both the startup or the unit in India plus the Paris region. And one thing that is so capital intensive these days, and not a day goes by that we don't hear about it, is obviously artificial intelligence, right? Um, from your perspective and from a Paris region perspective, is there a special focus for some of those investments in AI cross border, or which of those three categories does that fit in?
Yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. AI is big, and so it's big for us first because there's like a super strong hub and expertise in AI in Paris. So we have a good selling product, and that's important. It wasn't necessarily meant to be this way. Of course, like the US and China are the two big players, and there are a few other hubs around the world. I think we benefit from a science and engineering higher educational program, or I guess curricula, a combination of higher education curricula in science and engineering that are very math heavy. That's what I went through when I studied in France in my undergrad, where basically, even if you want to study chemistry, you have to go through like a whole ton of linear algebra. And I mentioned linear algebra specifically because when I ended up taking the machine learning class at Stanford, I ended up using these things that I'd learned 5 years earlier that I didn't think I'd ever use in my life ever again. And I was like, oh, actually, this is how you use it. And that's like something that I think over time, most French engineering and science students have found out. And so then AI becoming the next thing was like the field that attracted a lot of talent. But so in AI, we have a good selling product. And in AI, well, there's two reasons. There's another reason that's quite interesting for us is that France and India, and maybe the whole of Europe also and India have like a similar type of approach to AI and how to develop it. Like not a completely hands-off approach. Like I would liken it to the US, or a more like controlled approach, like you would have in China. And this is not to do, like politics, of course. Each country has their own. But France and India have, an alignment of vision for what they want to develop in AI. And of course, that translates into what you develop in terms of tech and infrastructure as well. There was an AI summit in Paris last Feb that was co-chaired by India. So that's a strong signal. And India's coming up with its own AI summit next February in Delhi as well. So we'll see a lot of that continuing to happen. And India is like really interesting. I think, of course, in terms of AI, it's developed a lot through the special relationship that it has with the US. A lot of US educated folk, either still working in the US, but like started developing their businesses in India or came back to India and, developed their own. Of course, there's a lot of homegrown talent and technology in India as well. And at this scale, you can't go wrong. And with this size of a market that's really growing and so digital savvy, that it's an awesome market, an awesome playground for technologies to develop. And I think it's surpassed a lot of expertise worldwide in terms of application development specifically. So that we do have a lot to learn from. And that's why, AI, among all the other sectors that I address, I think is a particular focus for us. So we also, benefit from this expertise and bring the
it's a win-win.
Technology.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So across the three, or I mean, I think you can expand it into any different direction where there's an pull for the Choose Paris region. What constitutes a win for you, Axel? Is it like a startup willing to invest in Paris, use the technology from there, or if it's the film sector or tourism? I mean, across the board, for you and the team, okay, what is like a when you sow the seeds, what is the end result that you expect, maybe?
Sure, yeah. So I guess maybe I'll focus on the investment part and specifically on startups. And I do happen to talk to a lot of startups in, in any field, but specifically focus on startups. And the tech sector is of interest to us. A success is first beyond even actually like setting up a company and hiring people in Paris. The first thing is, I must admit that in India, Paris is not necessarily on everyone's map in terms of business and investments. I think we're lacking there. Like, what we feel the perception should be and where it's at. People, of course, are very familiar, and I'm drawing broad generalizations here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
People are very familiar with, the US and why they should invest there. When you get a little closer to Europe, the UK, of course, and if you look at continental Europe, I think Germany is really the country that like always comes back in conversations, and for good reasons, of course. It's a great place for business and industry specifically. But we feel that when I talk and when I wear my tourism hat, this is an easy sell and we're well recognized. There's no issue with that. Or even in investments, if I talk to people in the fashion and luxury segment, then of course it's an easy sell. In tech, in industry, maybe apart from aeronautics, aerospace, because Airbus, people are quite familiar with the company. Otherwise, they're curious, of course, but they're not as familiar with it. So I think the first win for me is putting France and Paris like back on the map where we feel that it should belong, which is, it should be like, you know, like pretty much at the same level as London, in our opinion.
Yeah.
But in a lot of conversations that I have, it's not. I have to be frank about that. So that's the first win. And the second win is once that's done is, of course, like our KPIs would be like the number of companies that are created, the number of jobs that are created, and generally like the benefits that our economy derives from it. But for me, it's, I look at it as like a longer term type of project where we don't want just people to like set up a company, try it out, and then, if it works, if it doesn't work, then that's not a problem anymore. We do want these companies to grow. We want them to, and because then, of course, coming back to the first goal, then they become ambassadors of our great relays in the Indian business ecosystem to say, hey, actually, like, this is a great place to do business. So there's some hand holding that we do. We help people understand what the markets, might hold for them, what opportunities they might find. We help them with the logistics of, like setting up, finding an office space, etc., etc. But then we keep in touch. We keep like connecting them with some players that we think might be relevant for them. And then, hopefully organically, they also come to us and we keep this relationship and help them grow. And, I'm not just talking about the small guys here. Like we've been doing that with large companies like the TCS or the LTI Mindtrees of the world as well.
I would have thought, I'm a foodie, I must admit. The whole food industry and the wine industry must be a big draw as well. India has exploded, especially with, Instagram and social media and stuff, right? The world is such a small place right now. Everybody wants a good, everybody wants a nice cheese from France. I would have imagined even that's a big draw. Do you see that at all or no?
Absolutely, yes. And so, of course, we see that as a big draw in the tourism sector. Food tours, bakery hops. One thing that I've been suggesting to people that, have already come to Paris once is like the tea times, the high teas in palaces, which are like just great experiences. So yes, absolutely a big draw. And, a lot of people just travel to also explore that. As you said, Instagram is a big driver for that. But I think it's also something that we see for people that might want to consider living in Paris. The quality of life there is also reflected in like, the food that you can have and the food scene there.
Absolutely. So in your journey so far in India, Axel, I think you've done this for close to 2 years now.
Yes.
When you started off to where you are now, what are the things that you've kind of mentally had to adapt in terms of what you expected versus, I mean, the reason I ask this is, I mean, it's a different culture. You start off in a different region, and of course, I mean, in any big country, I mean, there's bureaucracy. I mean, in the type of stuff that you do, there's government involved. Their timelines are not the same as ours. The private sector has their own timeline, and some people work the weekend, some people don't. So there's so many challenges that you got to deal with, right? So how have you change personally, in terms of approaching some of these things? Plus, I mean, you obviously have to relay that back to, your organization saying, hey, I mean, these are some of the things that we need to expect. What you might have thought 2 years back to what it is right now, I mean, you would have evolved as well, right? I mean, any revelations come to mind?
The first thing is I actually find, so I evangelize, Paris in India. I also evangelize India in Paris, to be honest. And this I didn't
Very
expect,
nice.
but I'm finding myself like, educating my colleagues and, a lot of our like other partners, local partners in Paris about what India, like what's happening in India first. Like in so many things, India is leapfrogging what's happening in elsewhere in the world. UPI and the whole India stack is like a great example of this huge project, government-run project that has really changed a lot of things for Indians, and now it's spreading to other parts of the globe. Now you can buy your, I'll throw that one in. You can buy your Eiffel Tower ticket with UPI. So that's one thing, and I do have to say that it's probably not just in France. There are still like some outdated, I think, ideas about India that do need some updating. And then let's see, in 2 years, I guess, it's like it's a common thing to say, but India's just not one country. It's a whole continent. So there's also these very different cultures, and that reflects in business as well between different parts of India that you do have to take into account when you talk to a startup entrepreneur from Chennai, or if they're based in Delhi. I guess the startup world is maybe a little less marked in that way in terms of business culture. It tends to be more the startup culture, and then maybe some regional like touches in more regular businesses. I guess that would be the other way around. But that's one thing that basically you don't uh, you don't have the same, especially when I think about investors, the same timelines, the same decision making process, the same way to even just like build a relationship when you're traveling across India. Uh,
I think to your point, you bring up a super important point that, I mean, even though you treat India as one country, I mean, all the different states bring in their own set of complexities and, you know, yeah, no, I wouldn't want to call it challenges, but I mean, their own interesting aspects to the whole startup world. I mean, it's like a competition of sorts between states as well as to, who gets to do what first, who gets to invest. I mean, who invests in me? How can I invest in you? So that's a very interesting dynamic as well. I don't think I see as much in the States, right? I mean, I don't, I mean, I'm pretty sure there are parts of Europe where you might see that. For example, I mean, I've personally seen that in the Bavaria region in Germany, right? I mean, they try to pull a lot of such talent into Bavaria versus other parts of Germany. And I'm sure you see that with the Choose Paris region as well. I mean, I'm sure there are other pockets of France that are saying, come invest in me as well. So there's some commonality that I think you can drop, where you can draw parallels, if you will, to that between India and Europe.
Very different, cultures, different languages, obviously, but also sometimes some competition. Thankfully, in France, so I work a lot with people from like Business France, which is the counterpart organization for the whole of France, and people from the embassy as well. And it's, seamless basically. For a lot of investment projects, there's not much competition between Paris and the rest of the country because that's where it makes the most sense. Again, everyone wants the investor, the new company to be successful. That's the best way to then, have ambassadors that can also evangelize along with us. And so it doesn't make sense to push for a company to go to a specific region, a specific city where they might not find, the right environment to thrive. So in that way, whenever I meet entrepreneurs that probably wouldn't be a good fit for Paris, but elsewhere in France, then I'm happy to show them the right direction and connect them with the right person in that way. I
Gotcha.
can't say, I must be honest, I can't say that we collaborate with that as much with our German friends.
So I will wrap this up by asking you a little bit of a personal question. I mean, having been in India for 2 years, Axel, what's your favorite cuisine, or what's your favorite go-to comfort food in India amongst the plethora of items that are there?
Okay, so my wife is a Malayali, so I have to list something from Kerala, and I'll list two things. Comfort food is gonna be what actually I used to eat every morning. So when we moved to India, I decided to take a few months off. So as I mentioned, my wife is a Malayali. I started learning a little bit of Malayalam, the language in Kerala, when we met and when we got married and when I met her family. But as a language nerd, I was never satisfied with the level that I'd reached back then. And so I took 3 months off to just be by myself without my in-laws, hand holding me, or even my wife hand holding me. And I went to Trivandrum in Kerala and took language classes and just fended for myself and enjoyed the life there for 3 months. And so every morning I'd eat pongal, which I guess is not specifically from Kerala. You get it in Tamil Nadu as well. And that's just come to that's definitely become my comfort food now. And then the other one is just biryani, Kerala biryani. My God.
Do you get good pongal in Mumbai?
Yes, absolutely. But
Okay.
I recently got this hold of this awesome cookbook from Chettinad cuisine from this restaurant called the Bangala, which is a really nice hotel and restaurants. And so they have a pongal recipe that now I make. And my wife's starting to get sick of it, but I make it every day.
Yeah, as a proud Tamilian myself, I'm happy that you picked a Tamil dish for your favorite dish. But I mean, I'm biased as well. My wife's a Malayali too,
Uh,
so I understand what you mean by the dishes from Kerala. I'm not a big fan of the biryanis from there, but I mean, I do love my Kerala dishes. I mean, the beef fry is one of my favorites. That's awesome, Axel. So with that, I want to say thanks again, Axel, for coming and sharing your story, both your personal side as well as telling us about the Choose Paris region and the work that you and the team are doing in India. All the best to you. Enjoy your time in India, and hope you get plenty of investments in the Paris region and collaboration with all the Indian sectors. Wish you the best and hope to have you on sometime in the future, Axel.
Hey, thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me. It was awesome to get to chat like that with you. And yeah, I mean, all the best for your podcast. I've been listening to the last few episodes, and it's always so inspiring and interesting. So I'm looking forward to the next ones as well.
Right, sir. Thank you. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too.